Hey, welcome to Mayhem with Maverick, brought to you by Mayhem Studios. Well, I've been gone for a little bit, had some stuff going on with the family. Son graduated high school, a lot of celebrations, lost track of time, but I'm back now. So what we're going to talk about today is what everybody's talking about, is all the stuff that's going on with Iran. Now, unfortunately, people are a little confused on the left about what the president and the president can't do. But let's get a little bit back farther, and let's talk about why Iran is an issue. Maybe you don't think Iran's an issue, but Iran is an issue, and it's been an issue since the 70s. Because before 1979, Iran was a monarchy. It had a crown prince. In 1979, the Islamic Republic had an uprising and took over the country and ousted out the crown prince and his family, and then took over rule over Iran and made it an Islamic state, which meant that the supreme leader is the head of the country, who is also the Islamic religious leader. So that's when Iran changed. Okay, so you can find pictures from the 70s where there were women in bikinis and people were enjoying life in Iran. And after the Ayatollah took over and made Iran an Islamic republic, they had to start covering themselves up. Women became, I wouldn't even say second-class citizens, like, third, fourth, fifth-class citizens. All right, Iran, and then on top of that, Iran had issues with Israel. Iran had issues with us for years. I mean, I remember it growing up in the 80s, and it was all about, death to America, death to America. This is all stuff that's been going on for a long time. And if you don't believe a lot of what's going on, all you have to do is go back in time and see that Iran has not been a very cooperative Middle Eastern country. They have always had an issue with Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They want to wipe us off the face of the earth. And they use proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all these other little terrorist organizations to kind of make it look like to some of the world who have blinders on that they're free and clear. They're not doing anything wrong. But we all know that the money that goes through Iran goes into these terrorist organizations. And these are the terrorist organizations that attack Israel and attack other countries. And to be honest, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries are not happy with Iran either. I was in Kuwait and Bahrain. I worked with some Kuwaiti naval officers. They can't stand Iran. Okay. And in the 80s, there was the Iraq-Iranian war. We backed Iraq. We gave money to Iraq, which came to bite us in the ass down the line, which it normally does with this country, our country. We gave a ton of money to Iraq so that they could beat the Iranians. And nothing really happened. The war ended. But Iraq used all that money and Saddam Hussein took over. And then we had to go out Saddam Hussein because he was just as bad as the Iranians. All right. So I'm going to get into a couple things to make you understand why Trump had the right to do what he did, right? Because you got AOC and Schumer and all these jerks on the left saying, oh, no, he has no right to declare war. He can't do this. And they're right and they're wrong, okay? The president of the United States does not have the power to declare war. Only Congress. Hence, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Vietnam. Okay. Vietnam was not a war. We call it a war for definition purposes, but per governmental definition, Vietnam was not a war. Vietnam was a police action. And we did certain things that Congress allowed, but they never fully committed and called it a war and declared war. Okay. So now that we got this straight, right? Trump can't declare war. Only Congress. But the president has powers and authority that they can do certain things. And we're going to go over some of the other presidents, Republican and Democrat, to prove to you what Trump did this week is more than enough within his powers. And the left doesn't want to remember some of their own leaders doing it. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the War Powers Resolution. Okay. Some people also call it the War Powers Resolution of 1973. This is a federal law, and I'm reading. Okay. I'm reading. I know a lot of people can't stand when I look off and read. I'm reading this so that you get the full definition and the facts. I've looked this up. I researched it. As my friend Scotty said, I'm spitting the truth. Okay. So the War Powers Resolution is a federal law intended to check the U.S. president's power to commit the United States to an armed conflict without the consent of the U.S. Congress. The resolution was adopted in the form of a United States Congressional Joint Resolution. It provides that the president can send U.S. armed forces into action abroad only by declaration of war by Congress, statutory authorization, or in the case of a national emergency created by an attack upon the United States, its territories, or possessions, or its own armed forces. So what that's saying is that the president cannot do anything unless it's in protection or in retaliation. Okay, that's what it's saying. But it gets deeper. See, this is the only part that the liberals and the left want you to hear, is it says president can't do anything. But there's more. When you dig deeper, the War Powers Resolution requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing armed forces to military action and forbids armed forces from remaining for more than 60 days with a further 30-day withdrawal period without congressional authorization for use of military force or a declaration of war. So that part of the War Powers Resolution says that he can still do certain things as long as he notifies Congress within 48 hours. He doesn't keep boots on ground more than 60 days and has a 30-day withdrawal period. He can do all that without Congress permission. Okay. So what did Trump do? Trump dropped a bunch of bombs on Iran at nuclear plants that were possibly, and I'm not going to get into it, intelligence stated they were possibly making nuclear material for weapons. Okay, I'm not going to get into that part. I'm getting into, did he have authorization? Because this is the left screaming right now the past couple days, which by the other part of the resolution, he does, as long as he notifies them within 48 hours and he doesn't put boots on ground more than 60 days, which we already know. Trump said he doesn't plan on putting boots on ground in Iran. He doesn't want that. He wants what we call peace through strength. He bombed them because they weren't coming back to the table. And there's a lot of other things. And there's some retribution for some things that have happened throughout the years. I'll show you a picture that you might remember when Obama was president, where the Iranians took hostage of several U.S. Navy sailors. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. But again, now the gist. So now you know he has authority to do this. He has the right to do this as the president. Okay. Netanyahu has also said he doesn't want to put boots on ground. They don't want a full blown out war. No one wants a full blown out war with Iran. But the masses to be will put them in check. And I'm going to tell you, there are multiple Middle Eastern countries that are happy this happened. Okay? Because if they weren't, they would have retaliated against Israel. They would have retaliated against us. They would have shot down the Israeli planes. They would have shot at us. Saudi Arabia didn't do anything. Bahrain didn't do anything. Iraq didn't do anything. Syria didn't do anything. All the other countries didn't do jack shit when we did this. And even afterwards, nobody freaking shot stuff at us or shot stuff at the Israelis. Only Iran. Hezbollah didn't. Hamas didn't. Houthis didn't. So you might want to take a look, again, to the history and know that there are people in Iran, the citizens, there's a difference now. And you have to remember this, right? The Iranian government and the Iranian people, two totally different things. The Iranian people are good people, just like all of us. Their government, the Islamic Republic that's running them, they're not good people. They haven't been good people. They've done some horrible things throughout the world and throughout history since 1979. Okay, so we got to remember that there are people in that country that are happy that this happened too, and they're just waiting for that right moment. Now, everyone wants to use that word regime change. Okay, this is not what Trump's trying to do. He just dropped some bombs to say, hey, get back to the to the treaty table so we can talk about a ceasefire. We can talk about getting along. He believes that the Middle East is very influential in the world. Many of those countries can do great things, but they need to get along. Okay. Now let's go back. We're going to go back to what the U.S. Constitution says about war. Okay. And under the United States Constitution, war powers are divided. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the following powers: to declare war, to grant letters of marque and reprisal. Those are old words. What that means is we can give license to private citizens to capture enemy vessels. We can get pirates. That's what that is. We can make people, hey, Mike, you got a boat? You got a big ship? We're going to let you go attack and go after enemy vessels. It's pirates, okay? Or what we call privateers. That's where the word pirate comes from, privateers. We can go off on that on a whole nother schedule, okay? They also are authorized to raise and support armies for terms up to 2 years at a time, provide and maintain a navy, make rules of the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, create the UCMJ and all our military laws, provide for calling forth the militia. When in the Constitution, the word militia, they're talking about the reserves, they're talking about the state militias, the state reserves. Make rules conquering captures on land and water. Provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. Again, not the armed forces, the militia, which is your reservists. Govern such part of the militia as may be employed in the service of the United States. So what that's saying is that they have control over pulling up the militias, the reserves that the states own. Okay. Now, Section 8 of Article 1 states further that the states of the United States can appoint the officers of the militia, which is their reserves, train the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So, in other words, if Florida creates the Florida Air National Guard, it is a militia. It belongs to the state, but they have to train them under the UCMJ. They have to follow all the federal laws. That just gives the state able to have their own people, but they can be called up by the federal government. That's why they have to be trained under the federal laws and what Congress requires. Further down in Article 2, Section 2, provides the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of several states when called into the actual service of the United States. So what's that saying is he's in charge of the armed forces. He's the commander-in-chief. And when we pull from the states, their reservists, their militias, they fall under him. So they fall under the DOD. Like people always used to say, the old Coast Guard was under the Department of Transportation. Now it's under the Department of Homeland Security. But when there is a declaration of war, the Coast Guard then falls under the Department of Defense and then therefore falls under the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief. All right. So I think you guys got a good, well understanding of what can and can't be done, right? Right? The president can't declare a war. I think we all know that. I think anybody who's gone through elementary school knows the president can't just declare war. Dropping bombs is not declaring war. Okay? Dropping bombs, attacking, ships because they're pirates. That's not a declaration of war. A declaration of war is, I declare war. You got to write this. There's a huge thing that has to be written out. The president has to go to Congress like FDR did when Pearl Harbor was bombed and get the votes to approve it. Okay. So now we're going to roll into another thing, right? So now we're talking about what the presidents can't do. So I want to talk about past presidents, right? So you understand that what Trump did isn't something new. It's just that this left, because it's Trump, is so angry at President Trump that they'll say and do anything to make it sound like he did something wrong. So we had many presidential administrations that have engaged the U.S. in conflict, okay? Don't stop. I'm sorry. I got to read it because I don't want to quote. I don't want to say something wrong. All right. It says, in the conflict as well as directed the U.S. military efforts without approval. Okay. So FDR did this during World War II. Now, again, that was before the war resolution, because the war powers resolution was in 1973. But just to give you an example how far it goes back, Franklin D. Roosevelt did this in World War II, where he ordered our ships to protect British ships. Okay? So we escorted them. And he also ordered the occupation of Greenland and Iceland. Oh, where did Greenland. Why does Greenland sound familiar? Oh, that's right. Wasn't Trump just talking about wanting Greenland to be, part of us? Yeah, because Greenland's important. FDR knew it. Okay, so, it's amazing if you research and go back in history how things link up. But the Democratic Party and the left don't want you to know these things because then you're educated. Then you're going to realize they're blowing smoke up your ass, all right? So fast forward from World War II to Vietnam, right? Now, again, we all know Vietnam, we call it the Vietnam War based on the definition from a dictionary, okay? But international law and our government's definition of war, it was not a war. It was a police action because we never declared war in Vietnam, right? So we were fighting that war. We were fighting in Vietnam for many years. The reason why the War Powers Resolution of 1973 came out was because of an incident that was leaked to the press that President Nixon was secretly bombing Cambodia. Okay. Now you're going to go, well, that's what Trump did. He secretly, no, this is a whole different concept. Trump didn't secretly do it. Lots of people knew what was going on and people were contacted. People were notified. Nixon was bombing Cambodia without anybody in Congress knowing. Our allies weren't really knowing it. This was, and it violated the circle of what the police action was. Cambodia was not supposed to be part of what we were doing. We were supposed to be fighting in Vietnam. So he violated, a lot of things. And that worried Congress. That made Congress concerned about the erosion of congressional authority, right? And they decided that the U.S. needed to make sure that there was checks and balances. That's what our country is all based off of, right, folks? Checks and balances. So they wanted to make sure that the president couldn't push us into a war without them knowing it, without them approving it. And obviously, you can't really do a war without Congress funding it. The president can't, it's hard for the president to start a war without funds. So you have to get Congress to fund it anyway, because Congress, they control the purse of a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to DOD. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the other presidents, right? Many of the administrations interpreted the resolution differently. All right. And I'm not going to go all the way back to 1973, but I'm going to cover some main points that people my generation would remember. All these youngins, millennials, Zs, all these, they should learn about these things, because once you start hearing and understanding some things, you're going to understand why Trump did what he did, but you're also going to understand that there's more to the world than just what you're told. And you have to do research. You have to look. I don't just trust Fox. I listen to CNN. I listen to CBS. But I do my own independent research, and I look and I find things on top of 27 years in the United States military, 22 years as a civilian police officer. I have friends and contacts in the military. I have friends in intelligence. I have friends in Spec Ops. I have friends all over the world. I've also been around the world. I've seen things. I've talked to people. Like I said, when I was stationed in Kuwait, I worked with Kuwaiti naval officers. So I learned things. I heard things, and I was taught things. And when you take all that into consideration, you start realizing that, both sides, the left and the right, none of them are 100% honest. But you have to do the smell test. Make sure everything's right. So let's talk about that, right? So I can tell you that I personally remember that Ronald Reagan bombed Libya. That was all about Muammar Gaddafi. He bombed Libya with congressional approval, right? Because there was perceived terrorist activity. But he also had multiple attacks on Iran in the late 1980s without congressional approval. So he bombed Iran. What you may not realize is only two presidents have ever forwardly went after Iran. That's Reagan and that's Trump. Two Republicans. Both bombed the shit out of Iran. Now, Reagan did it without congressional authority, per the definition of the War Powers Resolution. But the Reagan White House said that they didn't believe they violated it. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of those things. So, again, facts. Operation Earnest Will was a U.S. military operation in 1987 and 1988, and that was to protect Kuwait. You hear that country's name, Kuwait. In the 80s, the late 80s, with Reagan in charge, to protect Kuwait oil tankers in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq war. Again, during the 80s, Iran and Iraq were fighting. We saw a perceived issue with the Kuwaiti oil tankers, that there could be issues with those tankers coming out of the Persian Gulf and distributing the oil throughout the world, which would have caused what we had in the 70s of the gas crisis, and the gas prices going through the roof and sitting for hours to get 3 gallons of gas in your 1972 freaking Gremlin, you know? So it was involved in a little shadiness in a way, because what we did is we reflagged the Kuwaiti tankers as U.S. ships. So you avoided the War Powers Resolution, because now they're U.S. ships and we're allowed to protect our own. Okay? So as we did that and reflagged them, now the American naval forces were able to escort these ships through the Persian Gulf, through the Straits of Hormuz, through the Red Sea, through the Suez, into the Med. Boom, now Bob's your uncle, and they're safe. Once you get outside of the Middle East, those ships are pretty safe, okay? The operation officially began on July 24th, 1987, and concluded is September 26, 1988, when the Iraq-Iran war ended. So again, the 80s, Iran's causing hate and discontent in that area, in the Middle East. We're concerned about oil, which obviously our country's always concerned about oil. But there you go again, Kuwait, a little cog in the 87, which will come down to attrition again. We will be dealing with Kuwait down the line in the Gulf War, and then Iraqi freedom and all this crap, all revolved around oil and Kuwait. Okay. Now you get in, you're still in the Reagan years, right? Operation Praying Mantis, April 18th, 1988. The U.S. Navy attacked Iranian naval targets in the Persian Gulf. We attacked Iran in the Persian Gulf, including their oil platforms and warships, and it was a retaliation of the mining of the USS Samuel B. Roberts. Okay, so Iran laid a bunch of freaking mines everywhere, and the Roberts hit a mine. So we were able to, per the War Provisions Resolution, that was an attack on one of ours, we retaliated. So you can see where Reagan kind of walked the line. Some were good, some were bad, right? Still in the Reagan years. Operation Nimble Archer, October 19th, 1987. The U.S. Navy attacked 2 Iranian oil platforms in the response to Iran's missile attack on the Kuwait tanker MV Sea Isle City. So the Iranians attacked one of the Kuwaiti oil ships, and we retaliated. Again, because what did we do? We reflagged all the Kuwaiti naval ships, or all the Kuwaiti oil tankers, as American ships. So we were able to say, well, they attacked us. It's our ship. Which, again, was a way of circumventing the resolution. All right. So now let's go to George H. Bush, George Sr., right? The invasion of Panama. Again, 80s babies, 70s babies. You will remember, you might not remember the whole big thing, but you would remember it. I had friends that served in the invasion. I knew people that were part of the invasion. I knew people that were stationed in Panama during the invasion. So 1989, we nailed and just pummeled with airstrikes and invaded Panama to remove Manuel Noriega. If you don't know who that is, he was a rogue general that took over Nicaragua. I said Noriega and Nicaragua, which I just was getting in a roll. I guess the ends just kept coming to me. Noriega was actually the Panamanian de facto leader of the country who was suspected of using his military to drug traffic into the United States. That's why we went in after him. Because there was intel about all kinds of stuff with him. All right. Still, Bush Sr., Operation Desert Storm, 1990, 1991. I wasn't there, but I was in the military during that time. In fact, in 1990, I went to boot camp in August of 1990. We did airstrikes against Iraq, and they began. So we started airstrikes before Congress even passed a resolution formally authorizing the use of military force. Eventually they did. Congress authorized it. But President Bush Sr., he started doing the bombings and airstrikes before the resolution passed and allowed him to do it. So now, let's go down the tricky bill. So in 1999, President Clinton launched military airstrikes against Yugoslavia without any congressional authorization. This was the focus on Kosovo, was based off of the War Powers Resolution. He said it was based off the War Powers Resolution, right? Which allows the president to deploy troops for a limited time without a formal declaration. So he's claiming that he did that because the War Powers Resolution says, I can do up to certain things without your authority, and I can have, again, boots on ground for 60 days. So that's what he said. I'm doing this. Kosovo was an issue where I think it was humanitarian. It was the reason why, and again, I was in during that time period. It was a humanitarian issue, and President Clinton thought he was in the right with doing the strikes, and he was justified because he was protecting civilians from ethnic cleansing. Wait a minute. So Clinton was protecting Kosovo from ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing. So aren't we protecting Israel from ethnic cleansing? Isn't that what we're doing? At times, whenever we take up the side of Israel and we fight and help them, first of all, they're our allies anyway, but these people that attack them, they're normally, radical Islam that wants to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the earth. That's ethnic cleansing. So I think you don't need permission. If Clinton didn't need permission to prevent ethnic cleansing, I don't see how any president in the future needs permission to protect Israel from ethnic cleansing. Just an idea. Again, see how people use this to their advantage, right? So, Libya, 2011, under President Obama. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton testified to Congress in March 2011 that the Obama administration did not need congressional authorization for its military intervention in Libya or for any further decisions about it. So she sat there as a Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State and said, hey, President Obama has the right to do this, and you don't have a right to tell us we can't. Right? President Obama had bombed or used drones attacks against Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in Pakistan it killed no military targets, but a bunch of the civilians, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Syria, under the guise of terrorism. Some of those attacks were congressionally authorized and some of them weren't. But the fact is that in 1 year alone, in 2016, President Obama had launched over 25,000 bombs on 7 different countries. That's a lot in 1 year. Trump dropped 14 bunker busters, 75,000, or I don't know how many guided missiles and 50 Tomahawks on one country who was, building nuclear weapons, possibly building nuclear weapons, who's been attacking Israel since the 1970s, who's been attacking us since the 1970s. And you're going to get into an uproar about that. But President Obama can drop 25,000 bombs on 7 different countries in 1 year. Come on, guys. Wake up. Walk off the plantation and wake up. Okay? Now, President Trump's first term in Iran, 2020, January 4th, let me get here. Okay, sorry. President Trump's White House officially notified Congress that it had carried out a fatal drone strike against Iranian General Soleimani a day earlier. So what did he do? He dropped the bomb, killed that guy, which needed to be done, and then told Congress the day after. The War Powers Resolution states within 48 hours. So he told them 24 hours. I don't remember them having such a big kickback when he did that in 2020 than he's having this week over the bombs in Iran. All right? So now, obviously, President Trump dropping the bombs on Iran is to prevent nuclear weapons from developing. That's what he's claiming. That's what the intelligence community is claiming. That's what other countries' intelligence is claiming, that they had enough uranium, they had enough stuff to make nuclear weapons. And the fact General Keane said, they're also developing ICBMs. If you don't know what an ICBM is an intercontinental ballistic missile. If they were just about wiping the Jewish people off the face of the earth, wiping Israel off the face of the earth, they don't need an ICBM. An ICBM is meant to go across the ocean. They're developing an ICBM to hit us or hit. They're not going to really hit many of the South American countries. They don't have a problem with them. But some of our NATO allies, an ICBM goes far distances. You don't need that to go after Israel. Okay? So they got some shady stuff going on in Iran. And I can tell you, back in 2006, I was stationed on the USNS Say, which is a United States naval ship. It's haze gray. It's a roll-on, roll-off ship. It is crewed by merchant marines, So there's no military on it. The only reason why we were on it was we were an EST, an embarked security team. We were there to protect it going through the Suez Canal, Red Sea, and the Straits of Hormuz. Now, late 2006, we were going through the Straits of Hormuz. I was on watch on the bridge with the first mate. It was 2-3 o'clock in the morning. It was dark out. The ship is dark. The only red lights allowed. I have my security guys. I have my team. I have people on 50 cals on the bow of the ship, 50 cals on the aft of the ship. We have weapons. We have a ready team in case something goes wrong. We're all just standing a security watch in case something goes wrong. So now we're going through the Straits of Hormuz. This is a fact. This happened. I'm not lying. This happened. As we're going through the Straits of Hormuz, out of nowhere comes 2 patrol boats, Iranian patrol boats, and they hail us. They're demanding to board our ship and do an inspection. Well, that's not going to happen, folks. Okay, we're in international waters. They don't have that right. But they demanded it multiple times. And the first mate got on the radio, did what he was supposed to do, replied back to him, we're a United States naval ship. He gave him our international identification number and didn't say anything more. And they kept saying, be prepared to be boarded. Be prepared to be boarded. And they kept getting closer and they kept getting closer. And the first mate kept responding to him. Do not approach. Do not board. This is international call sign, whatever our call sign was. I can't remember it off the top of my head. We told them multiple times, and they kept getting closer, and they kept getting closer. And I finally made the decision. Turn all the white lights on, turn all the deck lights on, and 50 cals point towards them. soon as we turn the lights on and my gunners turned those 50 cals towards them, they disappeared into the night. They don't play fair, okay? The Iranians don't. And here's another incident during the Obama administration. This picture right here, this is of 2 patrol boat crews. I think one of the boats lost power and they started drifting. Now, they originally were in international waters. They started drifting and they drifted into Iranian waters. Not because they wanted to be there. Trust me, nobody in the American Navy wants to be in Iranian waters because it's going to be an international incident. They drifted in because they had no power. The Iranians come up and take them by force, by gunpoint, and held them for several days. Obama didn't do a damn thing. They just talked, and eventually they got him released. I can guarantee you if Reagan would have been president, bombs would have been dropped. But the fact of the matter is they don't play by the normal rules. Like, if that would have happened to our country, right? We had a foreign entity drift into our waters. We would have checked on them, did a rescue, whatever. We've done it on when I was on the Incheon. We rescued, they weren't combatants, but we rescued people. Okay? There's under international law, you're supposed to help people that are on the sea that are in distress or a mayday. They didn't do that. They took them by gunpoint and dragged them out. So again, Iran has been causing problems for this country for a long time. So brass tacks, folks, this was not an act of war. Dropping those bombs on Iraq isn't an act of war. It isn't calling for war. I don't care what the left tells you. I've already told you what the powers can be, what the president can and can't do. They can scream and yell all they want that it's not his right to do it, but he has his right. And guess what? Chuck Schumer said he was never contacted. Well, the White House provided proof, logs where they called Schumer. They provided logs that they called Hakeem Jeffries. He just didn't answer. Okay? And I can't remember who the newspaper was, but one of the newspapers said, Trump never contacted the leaders of the Democratic Party. He did. The newspaper had to retract their statement. Schumer retracted his statement. They did reach out, which he didn't have to. He could have told them within 48 hours, but they tried. See, that's what the left does. They play the game. I didn't do that. I guarantee Hakeem Jeffries just doesn't answer the phone when it's coming from the White House or coming from any Republican because, he is a person that just hates Trump and doesn't want to help, doesn't want to cooperate, doesn't want to be bipartisan. He can say he wants to be bipartisan, but when you see him talk, you can tell he's not. So, how did we get here besides that? Well, let's remember some things too. I talked about what all these presidents did. But let's remember, when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State, she helped supply Iran with uranium. When President Obama was leaving office, Trump was elected, Obama's getting ready to leave, he gave Iran $1.7 billion. It was on the news. It was a big freaking military aircraft with pallets of money he sent to Iran. And let's not forget Joe Biden, who, me? He unfroze $16 billion of Iranian money back to them. Now, this money was frozen during the embargoes and all the treaty agreements. He gave them $16 billion. And you can have it back. So you're giving them uranium, you're giving them money, and I can guarantee that the money Obama gave him and the money that Biden gave them eventually made it to Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and a whole bunch of other terrorist organizations. How do you think that Hamas was able to do October 7th? They had to have money. They had to have good training, But the fact of the matter is you got 3 Democrats that have really assisted Iran. That money should have never been given to them. I mean, we all know that Iran is not the best country in the world. Why are we giving them money? We're feeding them money. That money that was seized, that was frozen from them due to embargoes and treaties, is because they're fucking up. They were doing things they're not supposed to do that caused chaos within the world. Other countries were worried. Other countries were part of the embargo. Other countries were part of the treaties. And they violated them constantly. So we froze their money. They should have never gotten that money back. Again, just goes to prove Biden didn't know what he was doing. He may not even know when he did it. Somebody else in his cabinet might have done it, and he just auto-penned it. So, the brass tacks of all of it, again, I'm going to say brass tacks again because my brain is just fried, is that what Trump did is nothing different than any other president has done since 1973, when the War Powers Resolution was created. Just a quick note, President George W. Bush never dropped any bombs without permission. He followed the rules. After 9/11, Congress gave him permission to do what he needed to do. And he did. But all the other presidents that I mentioned, Reagan, Bush Sr., Clinton, Obama, Trump, and Biden, have all skirt the line. Either did it with permission or did it without permission. Or, I love Reagan. I am a big Reagan fan. It's kind of shady if you're changing the ship's the flag from Kuwait to American just so you can protect them. I mean, hey, you see the rules and you just changed it so you're not technically violating the rules. But you got to give them credit where credit's due. I mean, that's kind of smart in a way. All right, guys. So that's my take. Again, you don't have to like what I had to say. A lot of the facts that I gave you can be found very quickly on the internet. The operations, I don't make operation names up. I didn't make these years up. They're all black and white. You could find them anywhere on the internet. You don't have to go to Wikipedia. You can go to almost anything. Okay? You can go anywhere to find these things out. So I gave you the facts. I gave you my opinion based on my experience. Okay? So if you like what I said, hey, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. I'm trying to just give you some information. But what I'd love for you to do, like my page, subscribe, tell your friends and family to like and subscribe, and we'll get bigger. We're doing well. We're this close to 400 subscribers. I have a feeling we'll be there by the end of the summer. I'm still looking at companies with the merch. I hope you like my new logo. I think it's more edgy than the first one. And folks, on that, I'm out of here.